Better understand the numbers, we turn once again to Raywat Deonandan. He's an epidemiologist and associate professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Ottawa. Hello there.
Hi, how are you?
Doing okay. What do you make of the Premier's plans to extend the state of emergency for another month?
Well, it's not too surprising given the recent developments in both the numbers and in the report of those 700 unfound or interesting missing cases. So there's some chaos in the data stream at the moment, and I think until we get that system under control, we err on the side of extreme caution. However, I will say that most of the issues seem to be situated in the west end of Toronto Peel, that's those counties. And so most of the province is okay. It's just a couple of key areas that are problematic. And maybe a regional approach is what's required.
Now, when you say chaos in the data stream, what defines chaos?
I mean, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, of course. Chaos in the sense that where do these 700 cases come from over the weekend? You know, the sense that we don't know who's responsible for reporting what in some cases, that's a little chaotic. I've said for a long time that we've passed the stage in the epidemic where it's all about doctors managing cases and epidemiologists making models. We're into the phase now where it's managers making management decisions. And that should be the easy part. That's where we're stumbling at the moment. People not knowing who to call to report your case. People not knowing which forms to fill out, not having the appropriate reporting standards consistent across public health units. That's the kind of administrative chaos that's frankly unforgivable and that's fixable. So that's what I mean.
Is there a magic number, so to speak, or threshold we need to get to before we can get the green light?
I have my personal beliefs. I mean, I like the idea of having a percentage of tests that come back positive be less than 5%. Obviously, most epidemiologists talk about something called the effective reproductive number, which is the number of new cases that an old case produces, and we like that number to be under 1, and depending upon which calculation you look at, we're hovering around 1, sometimes under 1, but not a lot. So as a nation as a whole, we are below that 1 threshold, but Ontario and Quebec continually surprise us with their abilities to increase cases. So that's what most epidemiologists look at, is the ability of the disease to spread, and when it spreads fast, which is why this is such a delicate decision. It can't be done on we're almost there kind of basis. We have to be there for sure.
But that's interesting because that brings us to that idea of the regional model, right? The Premier Ford said he'd consider where some parts of the province would open up faster than others. We are, of course, in a province where people can travel from one region to another. What do you make of that idea?
I'm in favor of a regional approach. And look, Kingston hasn't had an active case in a while. Sudbury and Thunder Bay don't have active cases. Almost all the active cases are in the big urban centers like, Ottawa to some extent, mostly Toronto and Peel. So why don't we focus our public health resources in the hot zones, allow the rest of the province to start creating an active economy to keep most of us up and running, maybe even redistribute our non-COVID medical needs to these uncrowded areas and other parts of the province. There are a number of options available to us. The challenge, as you point out, is the ability of people to travel from the hot zones to the less hot zones. Again, that's an administrative challenge. We can fix that with the appropriate resources and creative legislation and bylaws in place. But simply saying that it's not possible, I think, is short-sighted. It is possible. It just takes some creativity.
Describe to me what would make you comfortable about, for instance, being able to curb some of that traveling back and forth, or what would be required if somebody says, hey, well, all the hair salons are open in Kingston, let's all go there. And there's I'm partially making a joke there, but if that we did sort of see this flood, or for vacationing spots as well, what would be required?
It's a good question, and it comes down to the nature of our liberal democracy. Can we trust people to make responsible decisions? That's kind of the model that Sweden took. They had faith in their population to make good decisions. Whether or not that pans out is yet to be seen. So one could have a faith in the nature of our democratic traditions and convince people of the need to stay put, or one can take authoritarian steps and put, borders and barriers on highways. I don't know what it'll take, but again, I think everything should be on the table at this point if we want to open up some businesses, open up some schools even, and at the same time keep the epidemic at bay. I think another approach might be, instead of a city-by-city approach, a region-by-region approach. It's unlikely that someone from downtown Toronto is flying to North Bay, for example. So you could have a North region, a South region, an East region, and a West region that are somewhat autonomous temporarily. That's a bit more workable, I think, than separating Kingston from Oshawa.
Just over the river in Gatineau, we're seeing businesses reopen. Quebec relax restrictions. Strictly in terms of numbers, why do we see such a difference in the way that Ontario and Quebec interpret the data?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. And the way we interpret the numbers is one question. Why the numbers are different is another. The numbers are different because they're different populations with different experiences, different geographies, different population dynamics, and different timing, the order in which things have opened. And the clustering of cases in Quebec around Montreal, which is an island, which is more easily contained, for one thing. How they're interpreted, well, that's another question entirely. We do count cases a little bit differently in both provinces. We, in Ontario, count confirmed cases. In Quebec, they tend to count suspicious cases as confirmed. So there is that play epidemiologically as well. But I keep saying this is not one epidemic. It's multiple epidemics with different profiles in different provinces and different regions. And it's a mistake to always compare adjacent regions with sufficient policy differences, geographical differences, and urban distributions.
It's interesting that when we're talking about that data interpretation, I mean, CBC learned yesterday hundreds of confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the Toronto area weren't flagged to public health officials because of that mix-up between two hospitals. How much trust do you have in institutions to deliver reliable numbers?
That's a really good question, and these days, less and less, right? But this is a problem plaguing Ontario for some time, as compared to, places like BC that has a pretty good data pipeline. Ontario, we have issues with the way that the data is reported, the lag of getting test results back. Sometimes kits are driven to a lab, and then the results are faxed to one office, and then faxed again to another office. We're using 1990s technology in some cases. So the infrastructure is not presently there, or if it is there, it's not being employed in the right way. But again, I said earlier, this isn't so much a scientific crisis anymore as a management crisis. And that's good news. It means we can fix it. Management issues are easily fixed with money and resources and guidance. So in the case of the 700 missing cases, that was a case where two hospitals weren't sure which one was responsible for reporting the cases. And that can be fixed with better corporate communication. So it's an all-hands-on-deck scenario where all of the professions have to be involved, including HR, including communications, including IT, including epidemiology. Including
whoever is responsible for the lag in data.
That's true, yeah. Everyone's responsible, really. But we have an administrative and management and structural problem in public health communication and data flow in Ontario. That's coming to the fore increasingly. So hopefully now there's at least incentive to fix it quickly. We've known about it for a while, to be honest, but now maybe people work faster on it.
Raywat, thanks again for being with us today.
Thank you.
That's Raywat Deonandan, epidemiologist and associate professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Ottawa. If you have thoughts on what he had to say, all in a day at cbc.ca. You can also always tweet us, CBC, all in a day.